Hey, welcome everybody. As been mentioned, my name is Ron. I'm the lead pastor here at Vitalpoint Church, and it is an honor to bring this message today as we talk about this idea of catch the vision. This past week or so, my wife and I, Desiree, we were in England. We were at an Alpha conference, and we were interacting with church leaders from all over the globe. But more specifically, we spent a lot of time with Canadian leaders, Canadian pastors. And I have to tell you, it was the most incredible experience to hear what God is doing across Canada. In some ways, it helped me realize how insignificant we really are as a church in the broader sense, but it also helped me realize that we are part of a bigger thing that God is doing across Canada, particularly in the church. What I discovered as I was leaning in more and trying to listen to be in tune with what God was doing in my life, the passion for what we do as a church began to rise, and I felt myself sharpening my zeal as a leader to make sure that Vitalpoint Church becomes everything that God intended it to be. What I want to do for the next few minutes is I want to unpack for you where we believe God is leading us in the next 10 years. That's why we called this Catch the Vision Weekend. Last fall, we went away, a few senior staff and a few extra staff, we went away to pray, to listen, to ask God, what is it about our future that you are desiring for us? And so we did this whole thing about 10-year, 3-year, 1 year, and it's called Wayfinder, and we worked really hard for 2 days. We started the whole retreat with 2 verses that I want to share with you that led us to this place of understanding where we're headed and where we believe God is leading us. These 2 verses are found in Isaiah chapter 54, verses 2 and 3. It says this, "Enlarge the place of your tent and let the curtains of your habitation be stretched out. Do not hold back. Lengthen your cords and strengthen your stakes. For you will spread abroad to the right and to the left, and your offspring will possess the nations and will people the desolate cities." Now, we started our 2-day retreat talking about these 2 verses, and these 2 verses really speak to the desire of God's expansive work of God's grace. We need to know that it's not necessarily speaking to a physical tent at this point, but it's metaphorically speaking about God's people. This idea of widening, strengthening, stretching out, broadening this idea. And that's why he uses the words like the prophet Isaiah, uses the words like enlarge your tent, stretch out the curtains, lengthen the cords, strengthen the stakes. What is staggering about this moment is that God wants them to be prepared long before the people actually show up to fill that space. They've just come out of exile, and they're realizing that God is asking them to do something to create margin, to create room for more. In essence, God is saying to them, be ready, it's coming. I'm about to bring a harvest to fill these spaces. I love this because God is asking his people through the prophet Isaiah to go through the process of readiness, which leads to expectation. It would be this faith part of them that they would have to do these things in order for God to prepare them for what God was about to do. We see this over and over in the Bible. You see this through the Old Testament, you see this in the New Testament, where God would ask people to do certain things in preparation for what he was about to do. We see this in all kinds of stories. And in here in Isaiah chapter 54, we see this. The heartbeat of God is expansiveness and the preparation and the readiness of the expectation that he is bringing the harvest. Now, what I did for our team in this 2-day retreat is I focused on the phrase that's right in the middle of these verses. It's the phrase, do not hold back. What strikes me about this and why I believe it's right in the middle of enlarge, stretch, and then it says do not hold back, lengthen, and strengthen, is the phrase is there to help us understand that we are to be bold and courageous. Do not hold back. I think sometimes we have bad theology when it comes to understanding what God is doing. Sometimes we step back and we say, well, God doesn't need us. Well, true, yes, God doesn't need us, but yet God also does need us because the truth is he works through people. You can look at Adam and Eve in the garden. When he created Adam and Eve, it was their responsibility to what? To take care of the garden. God desired them to partner with him in the caring of the garden. I believe that God desires to use us. The do not hold back is to be bold, is to be courageous, live with expectation that he can do great things in and through us, but we have to be able to step in and say, we are not going to hold back. So what we did for 2 days, entering into the process of the 10-year, 3-year, 1 year, is we allowed ourselves to tap into our imaginations around what God is going to do in and through Vital Point Church. And out of that 2 days came this beautiful process and where we believe God is leading us in the next 10 years. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this through 3 lenses. I'm going to look at through our mission, vision, and kingdom assignment. And then what I'm going to do is at the end of this, I'm going to actually challenge us to consider what is our part? What do we play in this whole future aspect of Vital Point Church? So let me review for you. For some of you, you're newer. Maybe you're new to church. You're not aware of this, or maybe you've been around for a while. The mission of our church is to point people to Jesus and walk with them as they become fully devoted followers of him. Now, this is interesting. We live, and this is something that came out in the last week or so when we were in England, we live in the most open time for people to be told about Jesus. We're living in a time right now that is unprecedented, a time when people are far more open. Often people refer to this time in which we live in as the pre-Christian culture. This means that very few people are aware of Jesus, very few people have ever read the Bible, and very few people even know the stories of the Bible. A post-Christian culture, and that would be the vast majority of people, would have some sort of injection of a little bit of Jesus and a little bit of church, a little bit of Bible, and they have enough aware of it that they're turned off by it. But we're living in a time which was referred to as pre-Christian, where people are searching for truth because they've been told by the world that they can find certain things in the narrative of the world, and they're realizing it's not working. So we live in an incredible time of opportunity to point people to Jesus. Some would say that secularism is on life support. Many are discovering that finding truth defined by your own guidelines is not working. The spirit of the age under the dominion of darkness is panicking because people are understanding that actually defining your own truth and defining your own reality is only increasing the prison cell of self. And it's not about freedom anymore. It's more about bondage because the anxiety is rising, mental health is rising, panic attacks, self-harm, drugs, alcohol, pornography, loneliness, lack of purpose and meaning. It's all turned up to 10. And society is beginning to realize and waking up to the reality that it's not working. All you have to do is spend some time talking to unchurched youth and young adults, and they'll tell you, talk to them that are coming to Vital Point Church. Just spend a moment with them in between services or after service or over coffee and say, what brought you to church? Many of them will tell you that they were tired of searching for truth in culture, and they started realizing that maybe they can find a solid truth to believe in the context of the church. If 1 in 3 people will respond to an invitation, that's what we're hearing right now. It used to be 1 in 5, 1 in 6. Now it's 1 in 3. We're realizing we're living in a time and an era where an invitation even to church is so incredible. So the mission of our church is to point people to Jesus, right? To point to the one who actually is about freedom, the one who is about truth, the one who says, I am the way. So when we live out our faith in Jesus and we talk about Jesus and we live Jesus, we're fulfilling what he called the early church to do in Acts, that is to be witnesses. So our role is simple as a church. Our mission is to point people to Jesus, the one who gives life and true freedom. Now, it's interesting when you think about Vital Point Church and you think about what's happening around the world, we're beginning to see this more clearly, is that God is actually moving in a particular demographic that we've never seen before or haven't seen in decades. It's about around young men. It's not just something that's happening at Vital Point Church. I heard this over and over and over again while we were away in England at the Alpha Conference, that young men in their early 20s are crawling out of their PlayStation dens and realizing that their lives are being wasted away, and they're searching now for truth. And many of them are having the stirring inside of them, and they're finding themselves in a church. So we see this not only in the context of Vital Point Church, but we're seeing it across Canada as well. And it is a beautiful example of pointing people to Jesus. We're seeing this over and over. Actually, the Gen Z or Gen Z, however you want to say it, they're actually reshaping the landscape of the church because many of them are being pointed to Jesus, and thousands of them are coming to faith in Christ. And there's this emerging thing that's beginning to happen. People are beginning to understand this unprecedented time of being open to the message of Jesus. We get to point people to him. This is why we do Alpha. I know I just came off an Alpha conference for 8 days, and it feels like this is an infomercial for Alpha. This is why it's part of who we are. It's not just a course we run. It's part of who we are because it creates an environment where we get to invite our friends to Alpha so that they can learn and discover who Jesus is, where you can bring your friends, your coworkers, your CrossFit buddies, or whoever it is. We believe that God is going to use this to help fulfill the mission in a greater way. We have a vision for the next 10 years to be running 20 to 30 Alpha courses per year, creating more space for more people to be pointed to Jesus. 20 to 30 courses a year over the next 10 years. That's what we're going to grow towards in the future. So our mission is very simple. It's easy in the sense of just keeping it clear. It's this: point people to Jesus, the one who lived, died, and rose from the dead. I would say this: do not hold back. Now, the second part of this would come from our vision statement. So mission, vision. Our vision statement is to be a multi-site church that reaches thousands of people who are exploring and growing in their knowledge of Jesus and commitment to his church. Do you know that when VPC started in 2014, there was a desire to create a space for people who are exploring and growing? And we didn't want to just limit our understanding of this. And we began to realize that these two words speak very clearly to who we are. But the thing about it was, we thought we were just going to be one location in North London. But God had a different plan. It would become a movement of many VPC sites. We understood that in order to fulfill the pointing people to Jesus and to have a wider impact, we recognized that we needed to look at this from a different perspective, that we would be one church in multiple locations. So for right now, we have 4 locations: Poplar Hill, Exeter, Clinton, and Forest. We believe that we are able to fulfill the mission, have a greater impact through a multi-site expression. So shout out to Exeter. You guys can all cheer right now if you want. Yes, you're there. Clinton, same thing. You can cheer all you want. Forest, come on, Forest, you need to be cheering a little louder. Here's the thing. We are not in your towns out of convenience. We are in these towns to fulfill the mission that God has given to us, and that is to create a space for people who are exploring and growing in their knowledge of Jesus and commitment to his church. We want to create a space where the curious and the believer make room for one another in order to find answers as to what does it actually mean to follow Jesus? What does it actually mean to be at all different stages of the journey of faith and to be able to live and exist together, learning what it means to have the roots of our faith stronger and stronger as we follow Jesus? What I love about this, though, is that we've extracted from Luke chapter 15 this incredible stories that Jesus told about the one. So we've kind of adopted a bit of this idea that we as a church want to be a church that gives heaven a reason to celebrate when one person comes back to faith or comes to home to faith in Jesus Christ. So multiplication then is at the heart of Jesus, and multiplication is the heart of the church. In order to do that, we want to keep the explore and grow in the forefront of our minds as we multiply into other towns. Like, for example, reaching the thousands. It's not just going to be one location, it's going to be many. So here's the thing. When a church starts to navel gaze, and what I mean by that is it becomes so inward focused, what happens over time, it just becomes a social club serving only its members, making it hard for others to join. What I love about Vitalpoint Church is that for whatever reason, by God's grace and God's hand and the leadership, we've been able to create an environment where the curious and the person who's already a believer get to grow, explore and grow together in the beauty of the body of Christ. Now, here's the thing that I want you to think about. A vision statement is great. We have it on our website. We have it in printed materials. We have it on our social media. If you ever join the flagship on a Sunday morning or come into Poplar Hill, it's very cleverly put on a wall. Here's the thing. If all it is on the wall or on a website or on a piece of paper, it means absolutely nothing if we don't have a strategy and stories around the vision. See, the strategy of cords being strengthened and curtains being stretched out and stakes being driven in the ground from that Isaiah 54 is that we have to do the hard work of making sure that we are putting things in place in order to fulfill. It's not like we just go, oh, we're just going to coast through this and just hope God does something. No, God has given us leadership for the purpose of moving forward with the strategies to be able to, and that's why the multi-site is a bit of a strategy around reaching people. But here's the thing, the stories support that. So I sent to you by email a story from Dan and Krista. I hope that you watch it or listen to it. It's a story that represents the actual vision statement. But I don't just think about Dan and Krista. I think about a young woman that came on the arm of a friend to Alpha at one of our locations. And she responded to Jesus knocking on the door of her life. I think of a young man who is in one of our sites around Alpha who responded to Jesus as well. He opened up his life by faith. I think about a young couple that is actually rearranging their lives and downsizing in order to have a greater impact for God's purposes in the world. They realize their lives are too busy and they're downsizing in order to have a greater impact for God's purposes. I think about the stories of individuals who are coming back to church, kind of stepping back in after many years, and their faith is being reignited in a powerful way. I hear the stories of individuals experiencing physical healing as people are praying for them after services. See, here's the thing. The vision statement is great. I love it personally. I think it's the most amazing vision statement for a church. But it means nothing unless we know the stories, because the vision statement will be fulfilled one story at a time, building on one another as we see God continue to do the work. It's one story built on another, moving us forward as we create the space for the curious and those who are already believers to learn what does it mean to move forward together. To reach the thousands, and to multiply the way God has called us to for the future, we recognize that this is part of who we are. Like, give me an example of this. Easter this past year, just a few weeks ago, we had on our Sunday gatherings, 1,016 people come into our environment to hear about the message of Jesus. I think Jesus would say to us, do not hold back. So when you think about the multi-site and you think about some of the things that we've been talking about with explore and grow knowledge of Jesus' commitment to his church, some of you are doing the math when I said earlier about 20 to 30 alphas per year in the next 10 years. Some of you are doing the math going, how is this going to happen? Well, it leads to the kingdom assignment. This is the beautiful part about it. The kingdom assignment is language around who we are as a church, and that is to plant churches in small towns. That phrase, for God so loves small towns, right? I had my hat on in England, for God so loves small towns. And I had this guy from Montreal say to me, hey, Ron, he also loves cities. And I had to break it to him. He doesn't love cities. I'm kidding, he does. But it was just this amazing conversation because for God so loved these towns, right? How is this going to happen? What will this look like? If we're going to be reaching more people and more alphas and expansion through family ministries and connect groups, what does this look like? Well, first you need to know some stats. I know you're like, oh, great. Here Ron goes with some stats. I did some research on this. In Canada, under 7,000. So I did towns under 7,000. I didn't check to see if they all had Tim Hortons or not. But anyway, under 7,000. Here's what you need to know. Across Canada, there is between 3,500 and 4,000 towns in Canada under 7,000 as population. Across Ontario, there is 400 to 450 small towns. Across southwestern Ontario, there's 150 to 200 towns or villages. Small town Canada is ready for a powerful move of God. More and more people are moving to these towns and these spaces. More and more people are becoming hungry for where truth is to be found. Many more people are moving into these spaces. And I believe that God is preparing Vitalpoint Church for a greater, grander aspect of planting in small towns. See, we're committed to the next, by 2027, to have 6 sites. And we're still on that trajectory. We hope by 2027 there'll be 6. But here's where the 20 to 30 alphas come into play. It is this. By 2034, we believe that we will have 10 sites in total across these towns where we believe God is going to leave us that will help us reach the thousands. We will have 10 sites where many people will experience a life-changing message of Jesus Christ, where we will see growth patterns and development in these towns, not for just simply the numbers, but to be part of these communities that actually with the message of Jesus can transform these towns. There's a flicker of light that is in these towns, and God is going to call Vitalpoint Church to be part of turning that flicker into a flame, which begins to impact these communities. Some of the work that we did, we began realizing that if this is true, 10 sites by 2034, all of a sudden we started realizing, oh my goodness, that could mean 2,500 to 3,000 people would call Vitalpoint Church home in some small town in Ontario, or maybe even broader than that. Alongside of that, we started realizing, what is the bigger picture when it comes to planting in small towns as our kingdom assignment? Well, it's the Vitality Church Network. We developed a website, vitalitychurchnetwork.com. You can go look at it later. We believe that God is leading us into this space where we are going to walk alongside churches that are like-minded, that begin to realize that they can have a big vision for their small town. We did this in India, and we're going to see this again here in Ontario. Here's the piece that emerged out of our 2-day retreat that blew our minds. We began realizing that the kingdom assignment, so the mission, the vision, the kingdom assignment is not only just about planting churches in small towns and developing a network, it's actually about regional movement that God is doing. Think about this. Jesus, when he walked on this earth, he spent the vast majority of time in the region of Galilee. You begin realizing that the region is where the church began to spread through these villages, through these towns. And all of a sudden we started going, God, are you calling us to be a more regional church? So that meant we began dreaming and imagining what it would be like to identify other regions that Vitalpoint Church can go to, where the church can be alive and vibrant and reaching more people and seeing greater impact, and then developing hub churches that would service those particular sites and those locations in those towns. And we began realizing, God, are you moving Vitalpoint Church to not just be in towns, but region? Think about the region that we are in right now. Just the region. If you look at a map and where our 5 locations are, including Grand Bend, you know what you're going to discover? There's about 100,000 people in that region alone. What would it look like to just reach one more family, one more individual? What would it look like to see God begin to transform these villages and these towns with the message of Jesus Christ? How powerful and beautiful it would be. I believe that what Jesus is saying to us right now is, do not hold back. Keep going. Don't let doubt or insecurities or fear get in the way. I'm going to provide. I'm going to go ahead of you as long as you're prepared to do what? Expand the curtains, strengthen out the cords, put the stakes down, do what you need to do, because I am about to bring a move of myself to these places. Now, let's transition. Like, what does this mean for you? What does this mean for me? Because if it's true that we have a unique vision, mission, kingdom assignment, then that also means for those of you who call Vitalpoint Church home, that there is a unique reason you're here. Like, you might be like, whoa, Ron, slow down. This is my first day at Vitalpoint Church. You're like, I'm not even sure there is a God yet. Listen, there's a unique reason why you are here. If this is true, the unique thing about Vitalpoint Church, then the realization is there's a reason why you are part of this church and why you call it home. Now, side note, if none of this resonates with you, you're like, I don't get this. I'm not interested in this. Listen, that's okay. No one is holding a gun to your head to stay. There's lots of great churches out there. I encourage you to go find a church that lines up with what you feel aligns with your heart. But this is what we are called to do and what God has given to our leadership. So what do? First is get on your knees and pray. I know you're like, I was looking for a little bit more action. No, prayer. Prayer is the biggest thing that you can do right now. I want you to put it right on the top of your list, just above where Uncle Billy's, ingrown toenail you pray for. Put it right up at the top, and you can actually begin to pray for the vision, mission, and kingdom assignment that go before God. Think about how powerful it is if 700-800 people called Vitalpoint Church home began to pray about this. Praying for the next towns, praying for the region, praying for Grand Bend that we're about to, launch, and the launch team is being pulled together right now. Praying for our leadership. Trust me, this is going into the darkness and bringing the light of Jesus. It is a full-on spiritual battle. Pray for the leadership. Pray for the greenhouse residents. Pray for Alpha. Pray for family ministries. Pray for Gen Z as they begin to impact our church and reshape our future. Pray for, maybe I already said this, sites 6 through 10. Begin to pray about God's power by his Spirit. Why? Because we want his name to be known, right? We want him to be known. So by his power, pray for a stirring in more people, an intensifying reality of searching and looking for answers. Pray for the deepening and hunger for scripture and community. Pray for our fulfillment through this and the strategies that we put in place. But here's what I'm going to also say. When we host prayer gatherings, show up. I know, like I just maybe stepped on some toes. Show up. The devil's going to say, oh, you're too busy to show up to pray. It doesn't make a difference. When we have a gathering, show up. Be there because we want to join together in praying together. Second thing is this. So first thing is what? Get on your knees and pray. Second thing, ready? Be a contributor. I know, simple, but yet important. Be a contributor. I know some of us are not there yet. Maybe you're a bit hurt from your past church, or maybe you're new to church and you're not quite sure about all this stuff. But here's the thing. There is no greater investment of time, talent, and treasure than to invest in God's kingdom through his church. No other adventure in your life will make such a massive difference. The church is the body of Christ. It is the only agent on the planet right now that will survive when Jesus returns. Like the only thing that's going to come into existence in eternity is the church. And your investment, where you find meaning, where you find purpose, when you prioritize connectedness within the church, what you begin to realize that you're part of something bigger than yourself. You become a contributor to God's work in his kingdom. See, here's the thing. I am convinced that God is going to disrupt some of us in a way for his purposes and his goodness, that is going to disrupt in a way that some of us might even contribute by moving to one of the towns that we are planting in. We've seen this already, people doing this. We've seen people move from downtown London out to the forest area because they believed that they wanted to be part of what God was doing there. Ask God, what it is that you want me to contribute? Put that maybe on your prayer list when you're on your knees. God, how do you want me to contribute to this? How do you want me to be part of this? But here's something else. And we don't talk a lot about this around Vitalpoint Church, and I believe I need to do some teaching on this in the future. But contribute by prioritizing your money and honor God by giving to his work through his church, okay? I know I'm racing through all this right now, but I want you to consider this. This is an important step. At some point, as a growing disciple of Jesus, a follower of Jesus, you are going to have to wrestle with your money. And you're going to have to wrestle with, am I going to walk in obedience with my money and honoring God through his church? Okay? I know that's hard for some of us to hear, but giving is not being generous. Giving is about obedience. And Jesus says this, where your treasure is, your heart is also. See, the world is bidding for your attention, your heart, through your treasure. So when you begin to put your money towards stuff and you prioritize that above the work of God, then the world has your heart. And you have to be cautious. You have to be aware. Jesus talked about this idea of making sure that your treasure goes towards the things of God, towards his kingdom, because your heart will follow. See, God uses our resources to bring about his kingdom work. Like, I love this. We can go back to the Old Testament. Moses, when he's getting ready to actually build the temple, which was at that point was like a tent, like it was a tabernacle. And what he said to the people was, I want you to go back to your tents and I want you to pray and ask God what you should do to contribute to the building of this space where we're going to meet with God. So they go and they come back and they bring so much stuff. They bring so many contributing things to make this happen that the builders of the tabernacle said, please tell people to stop bringing because we have too much. That's the dream of every pastor, but we'll set that aside for a second. What Moses was doing was he was saying, I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to put this in front of you. You need to go before God because your giving is not about generosity, it is about the obedience, okay? So the last thing is this, invest and invite. So get on your knees and pray, be a contributor, invest, invite, which can kind of go into the contributing aspect in this. What would it look like if each of us, and if it's true that 1 out of 3 will respond to the message of Jesus and come to church, who is it that we're investing in? Who is it that we're loving and praying for? Not just to simply just get them to come to church, but what is it that God has placed, who is it that God has placed on our hearts that we can pray for, that we want them to meet Jesus, that we want them to come to church and get into community and begin to realize that purpose and meaning can happen in the life of our church. Why? Because we all have one. It's a Luke 15 thing. We all have one. Who are you investing and who are you inviting? Gen Z, they don't have to worry about this. They don't even have a category for this. They just do it because they love Jesus so much, and it's going to reshape the future of the church. Now, let's wrap this up. Pray, contribute, invest, and invite. Do not hold back. Why does this matter? Why does this matter? I think that's a good question to ask ourselves. It matters because the one that we follow, whose name is Jesus, came into this world as a baby, grew up, had a good 3-year run, went to the cross, was buried, and rose again so that we might have life. He came in order that sin may be conquered, death would be overcome. He came so that people might have life and life to the full. We do this. We do this so that his name will be known. For some of you, this has maybe ignited you inside. You're like, oh man, I've got to be part of this. Others of you, maybe your first step is to say yes to Jesus and invite him into your life. But here's the other thing I want us to think about. The other part of this is we must understand that as much as we did the hard work of praying and listening and putting things on paper and putting things on whiteboards and putting it around the room and that 2-day retreat, we hold it all with an open hand. Because the truth is, God might do a mid-course correction. The truth is, God might have more for us. The truth is, God might have less for us. But here's the thing. We will go as he goes. We will do our best to walk in obedience to him as a church, the leadership community. We'll do our best, even though we might get it wrong sometimes. We will do our best to not hold back. Because at the end of the day, it's not about making a name for Vitalpoint Church across Canada. It's not. What it is about making the name of Jesus known. I love what it says in the verses that I read for you. For you will spread abroad. And we spread abroad for the glory of God.